Hey guys, what's up? How are you doing today? Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a reaction to President Trump's recent press conference in Morristown, New Jersey. It's a really interesting one. There's a lot of really interesting, very significant stuff to talk about here. So let's just get right to it.
Learned that Rwanda, you know all about Rwanda, and the Congo will be doing a peace settlement, probably coming in on Monday or Tuesday. We're going to be signing it up, and we've stopped a very vicious war. So that was an honor for me to be involved. I want to thank J.D. Vance for a great job, and also our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has done a fantastic job. So Rwanda,
This is good. This is very good because I'll tell you guys what was going on over there. Absolutely horrible. And I gotta say, I'm not a huge Rwanda guy. I am not a huge fan of their government. I am not a huge fan of sort of the Rwandan cause, I guess. Very predatory sort of country, pretty predatory sort of national focus that they have going on there. I'm not a big fan of. I believe his name is Robert Kagame. Kagame is his last name. I think his first name's Robert. Let me just verify that real quick. Kagame. Paul Kagame. Yeah, not a big fan of Paul Kagame, to be honest with you all.
term war with the Congo, a very bloody war. They're all bloody, but this was a really bloody one. Is going to be making peace with Congo, and they can get on to making trade deals with the United States and other places and have a much more normal form of life. We're very honored by that. As you know, we did a very great job with India and Pakistan.
Before we get on to India and Pakistan, look, yeah, so guys, essentially what was going on over there, so you got to understand something about the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, there are actually two Congos. There's a Democratic Republic of the Congo, and there's the Republic of the Congo, which Democratic Republic is the big one you normally hear about. Well, the Republic of Congo kind of flies under the radar a bit more. It's a bit more stable, although it has some problems themselves, too. The thing with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, it's basically a Franken country, essentially. You know, you have the largest group, the Congolese population, but they're far from the majority in all parts of the country. They're really more present in the western part, sort of near the capital and that sort of area that was once part of the Kingdom of the Congo, which actually encompassed a lot of what's now Angola. And look, guys, so what had essentially been happening, from my understanding, was that the Rwandan government was backing a certain rebel group, but in reality, this rebel group was essentially just Rwandan soldiers in different uniforms and absolutely terrorizing the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. It just absolutely trashing villages, ransacking, doing terrible stuff. And a lot of people even raised genocide allegations. And I can't comment on the validity of that or not, because genocide has a very specific definition. And, you know, not all the times even that there are mass killings taking place, it doesn't always meet the definition of genocide. Now, people kind of use the two interchangeably, sort of mass killings, mass atrocities, and genocide, as sort of almost like genocide is just kind of like a scaled up version of killing. But it's not really like that. It's a lot more specific. It has to do with targeting certain groups, specifically ethnic. I think religious groups are also included, but no. It's generally speaking, you're targeting a specific ethnic group. So if you're committing mass killings and not targeting a specific ethnic group, it's not considered genocide, which is one of the reasons why, Mao Zedong, despite having killed the most people out of any human who ever lived, is not considered to have been genocidal because he wasn't targeting a specific ethnic group. Now, mind you, I would personally maybe make the argument that actually he was committing genocide against the Han Chinese themselves, but that's a discussion for a completely different day. Look, guys, so now I don't know if the validity, I don't know how valid the claims of genocide were, now whether they were specifically targeting a specific group, but the fact that people are raising the allegations of genocide, and by the way, I'm not saying that didn't occur, I'm just saying I'm not sure the validity of that. The fact that people raised that as a potential thing that's going on, especially in a area of the world where most of the people who would be levying these sort of accusations, aren't necessarily going to be as connected politically with the different groups, right? Look, the fact that that's being brought up shows the extent of the devastation and the extent of the atrocities that were going on over there. Now, look, this had to do with the more recent flare-up of violence there, or all-out war that's going on there, which even led the Democratic Republic of the Congo to actually do I believe, a general mobilization of their forces to defend the country. So it was extremely serious. And now look, guys, even before this is going on, this sort of conflict flare-up, Rwanda has been taking little excursions, making inroads, expanding their influence, their territory through different rebel group puppets, and even, I think, in certain cases, including most recently, their actual armed forces. And look, Rwanda is a gold exporter. Okay? Not one of the world's largest gold exporters, but they export a significant amount of gold. But get this, there are no gold mines. There are no gold mines within Rwanda. Guys, Rwanda had been sending in guys, all right, who would take over territory, capture villages, capture mines. Then they have them mine, usually with local slave labor often. I mean, in some cases, they're bringing in their own workers, but regardless, a lot of the workers at these mines were not being treated well. So look, they go over to these and capture these mines. And then they take their trucks, they load up all the mined gold, they'd send it over to Rwanda, then they export it. Guys, I mean, it is the most cut and dry exploitation and, frankly, colonization that's been going on essentially in Africa since the period of the colonial days in Africa. And so it's some really bad stuff that's going on over there. Really, really bad stuff. And I'm not on the side of Rwanda in that one. Now, look, they've been living off pity points, basically. And Paul Kagame, it's to understand a little bit about what his government is. Now, after the famous Rwandan genocide, right, how you had the Hutu population, or at least Hutu rebel groups, surprise attacking the Tutsi population with machetes and killing a substantial quantity of them. That ended when Paul Kagame and his Tutsi army essentially came in there, ended the violence that was going on, pacified the country, and he has been in the presidency ever since. Now, back in those days, you would have seen him in a military uniform. Now he wears a suit as a world leader. Look, so they've done a lot to promote the memory of the Rwandan genocide as this terrible, horrible event, which it was. In the meantime, they try to disguise the fact that the whole Tutsi versus Hutu conflict did not just crop up right then when the famous Rwandan genocide happened. No, this, ladies and gentlemen, was a tit-for-tat atrocities. Tutsis committing atrocities against the Hutus, Hutus committing atrocities against the Tutsi. Now, so only the most flagrant and most internationally recognized, and really the climax of that conflict was when the Hutus massacred the Tutsis with machetes. Having said that, directly after, there was what was known as the genocide of the camps, of the refugee camps. Now, a lot of the Hutu population got out dodged, went across the border into the Congo, right, into the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And the Tutsi forces pursued them, saying that a lot of the people who were perpetrators in the massacre had escaped and were hiding amongst the refugees, which is I'm sure is true, but they proceeded to basically do widespread mass killings and massacres in those said camps. And there have been many, many different such events, tit for tat, both ways. The reality is, though, is that Paul Kagame and, frankly, Rwanda itself has been basically cashing in their pity points over the years and basically getting away with doing whatever because people feel sorry for them over the Rwanda genocide. And, people think of the Tutsis as, and by extension, sort of Rwanda, because the Tutsis, or at least Paul Kagame and his Tutsi army, have been in control of Rwanda for years. And look, they've been cashing in those pity points, and they've been allowing them to do whatever they want to the Congo, basically. And you know what? It's not okay. It's not all right. It isn't. But nonetheless, I'm glad that's all over. I'm glad that whole situation has been taken care of. I'm glad that they're making a peace deal. That war is going to end. They can start trading with each other on equal ground. They can start trading with the rest of the world on a better footing with more stability. And look, when you have stability, you can have business. When you don't have stability, it's really hard to run a business. It's really hard to make deals. It's really hard to do trade. It's hard, right? If security isn't guaranteed, neither is your investment, right? So this is amazing news. This is really great news. The art of the deal in action, ladies and gentlemen.
Pakistan, and we had India in. It looks like we're going to be making a trade deal with India. And we had Pakistan in. It looks like we're going to be making a trade deal with Pakistan. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. Serbia, Kosovo, likewise.
And look, guys, India and Pakistan, man. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember, it was like a month back, 2 months back at the most. They were bombing each other, having massive dogfights in the sky against each other, shooting rockets at each other, blowing each other up. And both sides were taking pretty serious losses. Now, I think it was pretty obvious that it was either going to go one of two ways had the war continued. India was going to eventually end up on top over Pakistan, or there was going to be nuclear war. As we know, India and Pakistan are both nuclear powers. And so, guys, it's really good that he was able to broker a peace deal between those two countries. That's not a war we want to see. We don't want to see any wars, but definitely that's not one we want to see. So that's great. And now he's talking about Serbia and Kosovo.
They've been fighting for years, and as you know, we brought that one to a conclusion. And now we have...
this is actually the first I've heard about this, but if he managed to actually broker a full official settlement between Serbia and Kosovo, and now, mind you, they haven't been actively fighting each other in a war for quite some years now, not since the 90s or early 2000s at the latest. But for the longest time, Serbia did not recognize Kosovo as an independent nation. Kosovo was obviously very keen on themselves being an independent nation, so it was a disputed territory situation over there. It both presented a roadblock for both of those countries' possible ascension later on into the EU, for example, and a big thorn in the side of both countries, right? And if that whole thing is settled and there's a settlement between the two, let's hear it. If that's the case, then we've got 3 major peace deals done by President Trump. So congratulations to President Trump. And now I heard also that apparently one of the Pakistani generals has actually nominated President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, which I don't know, but I mean, look, if he indeed has negotiated peace between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, India and Pakistan, Serbia and Kosovo, that might be a valid nomination, guys. It really might be.
A couple of big ones. We have Russia, Ukraine, which is making a little bit of progress. And we have Israel, and nobody really knows what that one is all about. We're going to find out pretty soon, I guess.
The Iranian
I don't know what that means, but yeah, sorry, guys. There's not going to be a negotiated solution to the Ukraine war. That's not something that can happen, or it's going to happen. Now, again, congratulations to President Trump for negotiating those peace deals, but this one is going to be a bridge too far. Now, I don't know if you guys saw a recent speech by Vladimir Putin. He goes, so some people have been talking about, there's some regions of Ukraine that we believe belong to us. Well, I've always said that Russians and Ukrainians are one people. So in that sense, all of Ukraine belongs to us. And before that, in his speech, he said that there's an old, not really a proverb, but a rule, like an old rule, an actual rule, that wherever a Russian soldier steps foot, we own it. Basically making the strong implication that essentially every territory where Russian soldiers have ever occupied now belongs to the Russian Federation, the Ruski Mir, the Russian world, the Russian peace. Guys, you're not going to be able to negotiate with these ideological actors in the same way you're able to negotiate with the Rwandans. Guys who are making incursions into the Congo for mostly resources, mostly for money. Russia, Ukraine, it's not really about resources. It's not really about money. I mean, those play a part. The mineral and gas resources of Ukraine certainly play a part, but it's not going to be the same ballpark. It's not the same game.
Mr. President, the Iranian foreign minister this afternoon said if the U.S. is serious about negotiations, that you would call up Israel and request that they stop their airstrikes. Will you
please. What? So they can have more time to build a bomb? No, thank you.
make that request?
Well, I think it's very hard to make that request right now. If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing.
And there's that aspect. There's that aspect as well. That's a good point. Yeah, when you're winning, it's kind of hard to be convinced to stop.
But we're ready, willing, and able, and we've been speaking to Iran, and we'll see what happens.
What was the thought process behind the 2-week timetable?
Well, he always does that. He always does the 2 weeks. That's his signature, dude. 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks. It's even long since become a meme. 2 more weeks, guys. Just 2 more weeks.
Just time to see whether or not people come to their senses.
Did the Europeans help at all in talking with the Iranians?
No, they didn't help. No. Iran doesn't want to speak to Europe. They want to speak to us.
Dude. Always dunking on the Europeans is so funny. I don't really share his negative view of Europe, but I think it's pretty funny how he He always dunks on them. And, you know, my attitude towards Europe and the Europeans, they're like distant cousins, basically. I mean, I literally have cousins in Europe, so, you know. We like to rag on the Europeans. The Europeans like to rag on us, but at least with me, at the end of the day, it's all, you know, it's all love, you know.
Europe is not going to be able to help in this one.
20 years ago, you were skeptical of a Republican administration that attacked a Middle East country on the idea of questionable intelligence of weapons of mass destruction. How is this moment different with Iran?
It's completely different. It's completely different. Dude, look, so in the case of Iraq, like in the Iraq War, now we can have a discussion whether or not that was legitimate, whether or not that was a good idea. But that is not at all the same situation. You know, so in the case of Iraq, you have them saying, well, you know, they're working on weapons of mass destruction. And weapons of mass destruction refers to nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. There was no allegations. No one was trying to say that they were working on a nuclear weapon. If they were, they would have just said that. They would have used the word nuclear weapon. It sounds scarier. But weapons of mass destruction sounds a little scarier than chemical weapons. You know? So they used that. So the allegation was that they're producing chemical weapons. They denied it. And later, they failed to prove that they had actually been working on said weapons. Meanwhile, over here we have Iran, openly firing up their centrifuges and spinning that uranium around, refining it real nice, and they're saying, oh, it's civilian, it's civilian. But then you have the, I forget the exact name, but the International Atomic Energy Agency coming in and saying, guys, this is not for civilian use. They're refining this way more than you need for civilian nuclear power. No, this is like they're working on a bomb. And it's like pretty well known. It's pretty well known that they're working on a bomb. There's not much question about that. There really isn't. So you also have their rhetoric differs quite a lot. It's quite a lot more extreme than Saddam Hussein's Iraq rhetoric ever was, and now they had some pretty crazy rhetoric them too, but this is a country that's chants death to America, death to Israel in their parliament, which it's crazy. Could you imagine in the U.S. Congress, a bunch of people getting up there, burning the Iranian flag, going death to Iran, death to Iran. It would be crazy. It'd be crazy to imagine. But this is a regime run by people who are psychotic. I mean, people who are completely ideologically driven. And, you can't let them get that bomb. Because if anyone's going to use it, it's going to be them. Like, to me, the prospect of North Korea having a bomb, which they do, a nuclear bomb, is not great. I don't like that they have one. That sucks. It is a little concerning. But to me, the main negative aspect is, well, shoot, now that regime is basically untouchable. Who knows when the people of North Korea are going to be free, if ever. But I don't really expect them to go out and nuke the United States unless we were to invade North Korea. Iran, on the other hand, they get a usable ICBM, which Israeli intelligence suggested they were working on, as well as a nuclear bomb. It would be a little tough to rest easy, I mean, I still would, but I would still go to sleep at night. But proverbially speaking, it would be pretty tough to rest easy with that notion. So I think the two situations, although on their face, when you articulate it the way this reporter articulated it, seems similar, but in reality, this situation with Iran is much more extreme. The sort of casus belli, or so to speak, for getting involved with that one is way, way, way stronger. Way stronger. And that goes to the United States, but it's even stronger when it comes to Israel and their reason, casus belli, for getting involved.
Well, there were no weapons of mass destruction. I never thought there were. And that was somewhat pre-nuclear. You know, there was a nuclear age, but nothing like it is today. And it looked like I'm right about the material that they've gathered already. It's a tremendous amount of material. And I think within a matter of weeks, or certainly within a matter of months, they're going to be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen. I was very much opposed to Iraq. I said it loud and clear, but I was a civilian, but I guess I got a lot of publicity. But I was very much opposed to the Iraq war. And I actually did say, don't go in, don't go in, don't go in. But I said, if you're going to go in, keep the oil. But they didn't do that.
What intelligence
Just steal their oil. Jesus Christ. Oh, man. I can't justify that, but it's pretty funny as a true businessman. If you're going to go in, at least take the oil, right? But no, I mean, look. His overall point is correct. Now, again, we can discuss, whether the Iraq war was legitimate or not. That's a separate discussion, but it's pretty clear that those are not the same situations as the president just articulated.
do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my...
What? Dude, come on, guys. Did someone seriously say that? Oh, dude, it's well known. It's well known they're working on one.
My intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
Surprise. Wow, guys. The anti-American leftist congresswoman from Hawaii is lying about Iran's nuclear weapons or a pursuit to get nuclear weapons, saying there's no evidence that they're working on one. Surprise. The lady who interviewed Iran's lackey, Bashar al-Assad, and constantly foments anti-American and often talking points straight from the Russians, which much to my dismay, he promoted as, director of national intelligence. Big surprise. The Axis sympathizer is talking about how Iran's not actually working on a bomb. There's no evidence of that. Big surprise, guys. I cannot stand that woman. I absolutely cannot stand that woman. And why President Trump promoted her to that position is just beyond me. Just beyond me. Queen of the Rhinos. Holy moly. Yeah, he needs to get a new director of national intelligence, because this lady's probably leaking intelligence to the Russians and the Iranians. Guarantee at least to the Russians. Guarantee you.
She's wrong.
Mr. President, are the Chinese in any way helping Iran in this moment?
Aquí te van 5 razones para cambiarte a Total Play. Velocidad insuperable.
Yeah, look, guys, before he answers that, the answer is most likely yes. Now, even before this whole situation started and there were some Chinese planes seen landing over there were Chinese planes, military cargo planes landing in Beirut. Now, what they were delivering, you can't really know, but it could be all sorts of things, and it's almost sure to be military supplies, either meant for the Lebanese army or Hezbollah themselves. And even if it was meant for the Lebanese army, there's a huge crossover between Hezbollah and the Lebanese army. And so they're already supplying some Iranians proxies basically in effect in Lebanon. And now we see Chinese planes landing in Iran. Most likely, yes, they're supplying them. Can't say for 100% for certain, but That's how it looks like. That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Reports of mysterious planes landing in Iran from China.
I don't know. They say that they're there to take people out, but I can't tell you about that. I get along very well with China. Get along very well with President Xi. I like him. He likes me. We have a
Yeah, taking people out on the return trips, right? You know, you fly in, okay? You drop some military equipment, military supplies off, then you fly back with some people in tow. Simple as that. Now, as for the Xi Jinping comment, you know, I understand it's probably just, you know, a negotiating tactic. He likes to use flattery to, you know, get on the good side of some of these, you know, foreign adversaries, you know, but still, I'll be honest, it rubs me the wrong way because, you know, I can't think of a single time where he said anything even remotely negative about Xi Jinping or, for that matter, Putin. I can't really, I mean, I remember one time he said Putin was no angel, which is like sort of criticism. And he said when he was doing missile strikes on Kiev during their negotiations, that he's gone completely crazy. So, I don't know. You know, Xi Jinping and Putin have to do a whole heck of a lot in order to get any sort of criticism from President Trump. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when it comes to our president.
A very good relationship. We'll see what happens. I can't imagine them getting involved.
The decision that you need to make on Iran, whether to strike militarily, is this the biggest decision you'll have to make as president?
I think most likely, yeah. I think so. I think it would be. At least I think how history remembers it. Yeah, I think so. Or how history will remember it. Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you that. I have to see what happens. I can't, really say that. It depends what the decision is. But I wouldn't really be able to tell you that now. I'll tell you in about a year from now. Maybe 5 years or 10 years from now. You never know about decisions. You never really know.
Former president.
Is he even going to be alive in 10 years? Huh. Maybe, I don't know.
The ceasefire while the negotiations happen?
I might, depending on the circumstances.
Would you?
Former Congressman
It's very hard to stop. I will say this. It's very hard to stop. When you look at it, Israel's doing well in terms of war, and I think you would say that Iran is doing less well. It's a little bit hard to get somebody to stop.
Sir, Liam Cosgrove was your former Congressman Matt Gaetz threw out an interesting idea suggesting that if you were to broker a deal where nuclear inspectors go into both Israel and Iran, that you could win a Nobel Peace Prize, and they might even rename it the Trump Peace Prize. Did you hear those? What do you think of that?
Here's the problem with the whole idea of making a nuclear deal with Iran. President Obama did that. He did that. He had inspectors go in, but it's not good enough. They just hide this stuff. It's not good enough. Just having inspectors going in there. I mean, all right, you make a deal with them now, and inspectors are allowed to go in, then, fundamentally, what's the difference between that and the old nuclear deal that President Trump himself pulled out of? Fundamentally, what would be the difference? Just the same weak deal with President Trump's name stamped on it. And now, look, I that's why I never even thought it was really even worth negotiating with them, other than to make it look like we're negotiating or willing to talk about it. Because whatever deal was going to come out of that probably wasn't going to be enough. Now, as it turns out, they really weren't even willing to do that. So the whole thing was out the window. Now, yeah, I mean, look, having said that, if he can somehow pull a rabbit out of a hat, somehow get a negotiated settlement to this that actually does result in a complete elimination of Iran's nuclear program on a voluntary basis, that's verifiable, and like theoretically speaking, that actually would guarantee they're not going to get a nuclear bomb, which is just I don't see happening. I don't see like a negotiated settlement like that happening or being realistic, or even if it did happen, for it actually to be sufficiently strong in order to actually prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon. But if you somehow manage to do all that, then yeah, sure, especially with the negotiation settlement in Rwanda, the Congo, and India, Pakistan, Serbia, Kosovo. Yeah, I mean, you got all four of those down. That's Nobel Peace Prize worthy. I'm calling it the Trump Prize. Come on, that's just kind of stupid. Like, Matt Gaetz. Oh Lord. Why are we even still hearing from that guy?
Well, they should give me the Nobel Prize for Rwanda, and if you look at the Congo, or you could say Serbia, Kosovo, you could say a lot of them. You could say, I mean, the big one is India and Pakistan. I should have gotten it 4 or 5 times. I should get it for the, I would think the Abraham Accords would be a good one too. But what do you think?
Oh, that was big. That was huge. That was huge as well.
Give me a Nobel Peace Prize because they only give it to liberals.
Would you support Iran being able to have nuclear, or would you support Iran being able to have civilian nuclear energy capabilities up to 3.76%?
You know, they're sitting on the top of one of the largest piles of oil in the world. I just don't know why they need that for civilian work. You know, it's one thing for certain countries to say, hey, I want to have a certain amount where I can go nuclear a little bit because we need it for electricity, we need it for air conditioners, etc. But when you're sitting on one of the largest oil piles anywhere in the world, it's a little bit hard to see why you need that. Yeah.
I mean, just to play devil's advocate here, maybe they don't want to, maybe want to cut their CO2 emissions. I don't know. Look. Here's the thing, guys. That if Iran wanted, to have their own civilian nuclear program, I'm sure they could negotiate with the U.S. or with their buddies Russia to provide them the uranium of the specific refinement quality that's necessary for those types of power plants, without having their own centrifuges. Because here's the thing, it's not really an issue of needing to or not wanting to, import anything, right? Because the centrifuges themselves are not built there, they're imported, right? So clearly that's not the issue. If they really wanted their own civilian nuclear program, they could just buy the uranium ready for use. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's obviously not that. Like it's like the scene from The Dictator. It's like this. Here, hold on. Let me find this real quick. Let me find this real quick. Take a look at this. For peaceful purposes. There you go. It's like this. This is essentially Iran right now.
Haz de tu sueño un negocio.
People of Wadaya, I come before you today to tell you that the world shall kneel before our great nation. We are 2 months away from enriching weapons-grade uranium to be used for peaceful purposes.
That's essentially what's going on here, guys. That summarizes that. I mean, that's Iran right now. That's Iran right now.
Are you concerned that Iran or its proxies
8 signs you are on
Oh,
your last
jeez.
reincarnation.
In past life, you were a warrior.
would wage terror attacks against American targets abroad if you order military action?
We're always concerned about that, and we have to take them out and be very strong. You're even in danger talking to me right now. Do you know that? You are in danger talking to me right now. So I should probably get out of here, but you guys are actually in danger. Can you believe it?
One more, Mr. President. Is it still your expectation that NATO countries spend 5% of their GDP on defense spending?
Well, I think they should do that. I don't think we should, but I think they should. We've been...
I don't think we should, but I think they should. Oh Lord. Nah, but seriously though, yeah. I mean, 5% is pretty high, but you know, it's it's negotiation. You know, let's be 5%, right? 5%. You know, and so oh geez, President Trump, oh my God, 5%, that's a lot. I don't know. We could do 3.5. Okay, 3.5. That's great. And now he's got them to raise their military budget. Now, but look, in all seriousness, though, the Europeans do need to raise their military budget significantly 5 years ago. You know, they, like basically only Poland, the Baltic countries, and maybe Greece is really doing enough to actually ward off the threat that faces them from the east. Now, I mean, Germany, they are working on a large rearmament program, but I don't know, guys. It might end up being too little, too late, or maybe not too little, but it's little late. You know, this should have happened during the Merkel chancellorship, which lasted, I mean, shoot, like most of my life. You know, I remember being in Germany when I was 12. Yeah, I think, no, like 13. Yeah, 13. And Merkel was the chancellor, and I think already had been for quite some time. And she was chancellor up until just a couple years ago. So, yeah. That should have happened during her chancellorship, but they decided to keep the military budget down. They wanted to save the money, which I understand from their perspective. You know, they wanted to use it for other things, but you gotta have a well-defended nation. And look, I know there's sort of a taboo with Germany having a powerful army, but guys, it's not, you know, it's not the 1930s anymore. It's not, you know, not even the 20th century. So, you know, we're in a different world. You know, you don't really have to worry about Germany having a powerful army any more than you'd worry about France having a powerful army. You know, we're long past those days.
Spending. We've been supporting NATO so long. In many cases, I believe paying almost 100% the cost. So I don't think we should, but I think that the NATO countries should, absolutely.
What does that even mean, paying 100% of the cost? Okay, so again, this is another pet peeve I have with President Trump. You know, the way when he talks about NATO and how much we're paying or who's paying what, he talks about it as if it's like some kind, like people are paying some kind of dues or something, or paying like, I don't know. I'm not really sure if he just doesn't really understand it, or if he's just misrepresenting it, or if he's just kind of plays fast and loose with the wording, or kind of a little bit of it, all three. But, you know, he talks about it as if it's like a tax they're paying them, or they're supposed to be depositing money into the U.S. account for protection or something like that, like as if it's a giant protection racket. But no, look, NATO's had a long-standing recommendation, not a requirement, but recommendation that every member state spend at least 2% of their GDP on their national armed forces, and a lot of the countries, most of the countries, have not been spending 2% of their GDP on that, on defense. Mind you, that is changing. More of them are spending more money on that, and that started changing, yes, with the first Trump administration when he was sort of pressing them on it, and then Secretary General of NATO, Olaf Scholz, Sternberg, I believe his name, so Stoltenberg. Yeah, Jens Stoltenberg. He actually commended Trump. You know, he was like, "Thank you. I've been trying to get them, you know, to do this for years. They haven't been listening to me, but you know, finally they're listening to you." But what really was an even larger catalyst was when Russia invaded Ukraine, and they went, "Oh, shoot, uh-oh." Long-standing peace in the continent is kind of, you know, other than like smaller wars in the Balkans, is kind of shattered. You might want to get spending here.
Spain decides not to?
Well, NATO's going to have to deal with Spain. Spain's been a very low payer. They were always a very low payer. They were either good negotiators or they weren't doing the right thing. I mean, I think Spain has to pay what everybody else has to pay. Spain has been notorious for low pay. You know who else was a low payer, just about the lowest? A place called Canada. Because Canada said, why should we pay when the United States will protect us free?
Yeah, again, the wording paying is bizarre. It's bizarre to me. It's always been bizarre because, you know, again, it's as if they're paying the U.S. or paying into some NATO fund. No, what he means by that, or what he's referring to, is their military budget. Now, as you said, Spain was well below 2%. And look, I mean, Spain doesn't really feel threatened by anything. They're not really, they're far from Russia. They're far from, you know, really any near clear and present danger to them. So I understand why they wouldn't want to spend 2%, you know, on their military, but they got to, you know, they got to. If they're going to be in NATO, they have to, you know, or they at least really should be doing that. Canada, though, yeah, man, Canada's military is pretty mothballed, pretty ignored by their federal government, pretty sidelined. It's not as well funded as it should be. Now, traditionally, Canada had a quite strong army. And now, we like in the United States kind of to give them a hard time, you know, kind of roast on them a little bit, saying they're our hat, you know, saying that they're, you know, they don't even have an army or anything. But no, I mean, look, like in World War II, they were the first to cross like the Rhine into the main part of Germany. I mean, they were oftentimes at the spearhead of Allied offensives. I mean, in World War II, I mean, they really pulled their own weight, or no, they pulled a lot more than their own weight in World War II, and they were also really a big factor in World War I as well. You know, they were in Iraq, I believe. They were in Afghanistan. I know that for a fact. And you know, they're nothing to scoff at, actually. Like Canada, in their own right, is a pretty strong nation, but. Yeah, guys, I mean, their military has been allowed to kind of go a little bit derelict. And, you know, I don't know why they've allowed that to happen because, you know, when you look at like a map, you know, they're right near the U.S., but you look at a globe, right, which is the true form of the Earth, you know, sorry, flat earthers, but no, I mean, look, like they're close to Russia. They practically border Russia in the Arctic. And look, like the Arctic's growing more and more significant, you know, on the world stage. You know, and it's not like it's only just started becoming significant. You know, when there was, especially during the Cold War, the whole threat of, you know, nuclear exchange between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, most of those missiles were going to be going over the Arctic, going over Canada, going over especially the islands that are part of the Nunavut territory. You know, and it's pretty imperative, actually, that Canada is basically, or at least should be, the sort of watchdog, the guardian of the North, right? With their vigilant eye, you know, guarding the northern flank. So it's pretty critical that Canada starts actually spending enough on their military and gets it up to ship shape.
And they've been right about that.
ICE.
Ukraine, you've been making progress towards a peace deal, but I don't know if you know this, but Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo were there on the ground in Ukraine, seemingly doing the opposite, trying to provoke the Ukrainians to keep fighting. What do you think of that?
He's been making no progress. I wonder what news outlet is this at? And they've been provoking the Ukrainians. Dude, there's been no progress. There's been no progress on a peace deal. None. No progress at all. At all. None. Lindsey Graham, provoking them. What a joke, dude. What a joke. These guys have been some of Ukraine's most ardent supporters in the United States government for years. Some of their strongest advocates in Washington. Provoking them. Jesus, man.
Well, we're going to see, and people have to be very careful with what they say. They got to be very careful with their mouth, because their mouth can get them into a lot of trouble.
One more. ICE.
I think that was a decent response to that. He didn't really take the bait too much. I mean, maybe a little bit with the, they got to watch their mouths, whatever. But yeah, that guy was trying to basically bait him into criticizing Lindsey Graham and who else was it that he mentioned? I forget. Lindsey Graham and another guy, basically trying to bait him into President Trump into criticizing them for basically their vocal support for Ukraine. And he didn't really take the bait, luckily.
ICE has said that they're trying to arrest up to 3,000 individuals a day. There are some communities that are saying they are fearful of being wrongfully detained or separating some families, even if they're undocumented. Is the fear in some of these communities worth the deportations of these undocumented individuals, a mass deportation program?
It's a tough subject because, look, we have farmers. I love farmers. I want 80%, 85% of the farmers, and I love them, and I'm never going to do anything to hurt our farmers. And you can also say the leisure business, etc. There are some businesses where you have a disproportionate amount of people that are the people that you're talking about. At the same time, we have to get the criminals out of our country. And we're looking at doing something where, in the case of good, reputable farmers, they can take responsibility for the people that they hire and let them have responsibility, because we can't put the farms out of business. And at the same time, we don't want to...
Density?
Look, I might leave it at that, guys. But yeah, I like the fact that he's getting maybe a bit more lenient on certain aspects of the immigration policy without, sort of abandoning the idea that he wants to be strict on immigration policy. But he realizes, that look, we have our farmers, we have our hotel industry. We can't, we got to be careful with what we're doing here. We got to tread carefully. We got to make sure they're going to have their workforce that they need. So I think he's been getting a little bit more wise about this type of stuff. So I like to see it. Anyway, guys, yeah, I think I'll call it at that. Thank you all.